Hello, I am Enrique Barra, and in this video we are going to see the component lifecycle. The React component lifecycle is composed of three cycles: the creating process, that is called mount, the updating process, that is update, and the destroying process, that is called unmount. Each one of them has some methods that will be automatically called by React at a specific moments of this mounting, unmounting, or updating process. These are the methods that we are going to see. But in the first step, we are going to see the process and when React calls them. In the mounting process, the first method that is called is the constructor to create the component. Then get derived state from props. Then the render method, and in this moment React will update the DOM. Finally, after the DOM updating, React will call component.mount, and the mounting process is finished. What about the updating process? Well, in the first step, when do we update a React component? Well, when we receive new props, or we do a set state, or a force update. That I remember you that is not very recommended. In this case, there is no constructor because the component is already created. We start here in get derived state from props. We have a special method, should component update, that if it returns true, the component will be rendered again. And after it, get a snapshot before update is called, and then React updates the DOM with this virtual DOM and everything very optimized. And after the DOM updating, component.update method. And what about the unmounting process? Just one method, component will unmount, and then React updates the DOM. Okay, so these are the three phases or cycles of the React component lifecycle. Let's see one method at a time. Render. Render is the only required method. It uses the state and props to build the component view, to return what will be rendered. So it can return a React element or an array of elements, a fragment, a portal, you can see more info here about portals, a string or number that will be rendered as text nodes, or false or null, okay, if it does not render anything. These are the possibilities. Most common React elements. Render must be a pure function. This is very, very, very important. Why? Because it does not modify state, not directly, not through set state, no, never. It does not write or read from the DOM, and it does not interact with the browser. If we want to do that, we will do that in the component.mount method. In render, it must be a pure function. Just return and do not modify anything outside, do not interact with anything, okay? Well, the constructor. The constructor is the first method usually, so it's here in the upper side of the component. It receives the props, and as a first line, it calls super props. So the React component constructor passing the props. And it can directly set the state, but not with the set state method, but with direct assignation, as we can see here, okay? Never uses set state. It does it directly. So this is a very usual constructor, very simple. Component.mount. This is a method that is called immediately after the rendering, okay? So in this moment, we can access the DOM, the children, create a set timeout or set interval, Ajax calls, or any operation that we want to do with our application. This is a very typical example with a set interval, and we can keep as a property the timer ID that this set interval returns. Okay? The component.update is exactly the same, but in the updating process. It receives the previous props and previous state, and it performs some calculations because it is called immediately after the DOM has been updated in the updating process of the component. The component will unmount is more or less the same, but before and mounting the component, before removing the component from the DOM. It will be called before, as I say, removing this component. This is the very good place to clear intervals or perform changes, because the component is not going to be in the DOM anymore. So just undo the things that needs to be undone before the component disappears. Source component update is a method that receives next props and next state and does some calculations, fine-tuning, just to return true or false, just to see if the component should be updated. By default, this method returns true, and we usually doesn't do anything here, but if we want to do some fine-tuning, some small improvements, if we have hundreds or thousands of components, we can do special things that React doesn't know how to do, because they don't know what our component depends on and if it should be updated. So we can do some fine-tuning, okay? It returns true or false, just if the component should be updated or not. Okay, getDerive state from props is a method that receives the props and the state, is called in the mounting or updating process before the render method, and returns an object to update the state. It is not very used, very rare use cases, you can see them here. And finally, getSnapshot before update is another method, also not very used. It receives the previous props and the previous state. It is invoked in the update cycle before updating the DOM. Okay? For example, it is not very used, as I say, but sometimes it is used to get the scroll position before it changes, in case you can after come back, because the value returned by this method will be passed to component.update. So in case you want to come back to the previous scroll, for example. And finally, other methods defined by us. They don't belong to the lifecycle, but we can call them inside the lifecycle. For example, in the component.mount, if we want to do a lot of calculations, we can create separate methods and split our code and organize it and call these methods created by us from lifecycle methods. Okay, so this is everything. Thank you, and see you in the next video.